This is Archdeacon Javaid. He's the new Archdeacon of Doncaster. I think technically at the moment he's acting Archdeacon. Is that right, Archdeacon?
Yes, that is true. I'm acting Archdeacon until I can be installed in a public worship in Sheffield Cathedral, which hopefully is not too far away.
I'm looking forward to that. I shall be there. So you've kindly agreed to answer just some questions for us today. So if I could just ask you to begin with, what does the word racism mean to you?
Racism. Racism is when someone is undermined, devalued, or discriminated against on the basis of their ethnicity or their color. So I hope that makes sense when we are not accepting people as they are, and we are not valuing them for what they stand for, what they bring in, and what they can contribute to the conversation, to the society, and to the role they have.
Thank you. And I think a lot of people would say that that obviously the country that we live in the UK here, that there's not as much racism as there used to be. In fact, you know, I think most people would think that racism is kind of done with. I wonder if you've got any experiences of racism that you've personally experienced, you know, in recent times.
I think we may feel that we are over it, but actually recent events of Black Lives Matter have opened up a whole new debate. And actually it has highlighted the issue which still exists in our society. And in the discussions recently within Church of England particularly, there has been voices raised about the lack of diversity. And in some ways, I think we're talking about racism, but it's about the wider diversity, which is not just racism. It also is about age. It's also about gender and so on. So we all have our biases, and those biases still exist. And in our society, we are still more likely to value and support and encourage people of same color, ethnicity, or same gender, and so on. In my personal experience, I give you a couple of examples. One, I arrived in this new parish, which shall remain nameless.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was walking home from church in the evening. A group of young people came behind me and asked me if I were the new vicar. And I said, yes. And they said, but you are Indian. Factually, that was wrong because I'm from Pakistan. But I said, that's not the point. The point is that one has to be Christian to be member of the church and leader in the church. So I'm a Christian. So my ethnicity doesn't really have anything to do with my position in the church. Few days later, the rumor went around the village that at this church, they have a Muslim vicar. Now that's complete ignorance, despite me having explained. And people just think that only Christians are the white indigenous people.
Yeah.
We forget that actually even people like our patron saint wasn't English. Recently, I've been reading a book called Every Tribe by Dr. Sharon Prentice. And it talks about the saints who we revere in this country who actually are not from this country. And the second example I'll give you, in a parish, I was appointed, and the local funeral director, who happens to be also the chair of the parish council, invited me for a drink. And then he asked me, what do I say to the people whose request that a colored person does not take their funeral? And my response was to him, I think they are prejudging me. Ask them to meet me once, and if having met me they decide that they do not wish me to take their funeral, I will not. But ask them not to predetermine what should happen. I have been appointed the minister in this church as a priest, and I offer my ministry as a Christian priest to everybody. My colleagues stood up and they said, we will not have anything to do with such families if they continue to insist on this. Even my white colleagues said that they would not take those funerals. And so together we worked through, and after a year or so, people actually started asking for me to take the funerals and weddings and so on, rather than my associate priest, who was a white person. Yeah. So it is when we come in contact with others and benefit from the ministry of each other that we realize that we're all the same. We are children of the same Heavenly Father. We were all created by Him. And His church is as diverse as His universe, which He created, and His final kingdom in heaven is going to be diverse, where people from every language, tribe, culture will be present. And that's the vision of the church and society I have. And I think that's where we ought to head, valuing everybody, what they bring in and what God has blessed them with.
Fantastic. And you just pick up on something you said. You talked about diversity, particularly in the church. I suppose that makes me wonder, a lot of people would say that racism isn't quite so in your face as it used to be, but actually some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you can't see is somehow even worse, because it's much more difficult to fight against when it's not, somebody standing in your face making a racist comment to you.
Yes, that is true, because we feel that we have made some progress. Say, for example, when Archbishop of York, John Sentamu, was appointed, everybody thought we have made a progress in Church of England, particularly that we now have a non-white person as an archbishop, and that has changed things. Actually, if you look in practice, how many other people have been appointed to those senior positions? And even within our diocese, how many ethnic minority clergy and diversity in terms of gender we have? And actually looking around, number them on your hand. There is a long way to go. And I think what will make difference is that we are aware of our bias towards the familiar and the same. And we have to make intentional effort to include people and bring about the diversity. And again, I'm here talking about diversity in the widest sense, not just ethnicity and race, but also gender and race and disability and so on.
And one last question, and then I'll let you get back to being a busy archdeacon. So it seems to me that human beings have this tendency to draw lines. I think you kind of alluded to it just in what you've just said, but to draw lines between us and them, whether it's about ethnicity or sexual orientation, or, you know, there's a whole range of different things, gender. Why do you think that is? Why do we always seem to want to put other people on the other side?
One thing, I think it's a human tendency that we are very defensive people. We want to protect ourselves. We want to protect our loved ones. We want to protect our identity. We want to protect our personality. We want to protect our church. So, you know, we want to protect our boundaries, if you like. And when those boundaries are challenged, then we are feeling very uncomfortable. And I think the issue we are discussing here is exactly the same, because our boundaries, our thoughts, our perceptions, our practices are being challenged. And it is a very uncomfortable place to be. And I think we together as church and as a wider society need to learn how we move on and not just look at our own personal interests, but also look at the interest of the wider church and wider society. As Paul says to Philippians, you know, consider others better than yourself. Do not just look to your own interest, but look at the interest and welfare of others. And I think it is when we look beyond ourselves when things will start to change. That's what happened in so many lives of people of God, including Jesus himself. When we sacrifice some of ourselves, only then change start to take place. And I think we are called to think more for the wider society, how we may contribute rather than being defensive. I think it's moving from that defense to being out with people and working for the community we serve and moving beyond ourselves.
That's fascinating. I could talk to you about this all day, but I suspect you have some work to do. But thank you very much for your time, and thank you for sharing that with us.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been a real privilege, and I hope one day I'll be able to see you all in person and share worship with you. Blessings.